Roald Amundsen is often remembered as a man of ice and triumph, yet his earliest years reveal a quieter paradox because he grew up surrounded by expectations of toughness while secretly carrying a sensitive curiosity that questioned whether he truly belonged anywhere solid. From an early age, silence followed him like a shadow, not because he lacked words, but because he listened more than he spoke, noticing how conversations drifted past him while his thoughts remained anchored elsewhere. This quiet attention created a tension inside him, since the world expected bold declarations, while his inner voice preferred careful observation and patient thinking. As other children found comfort in familiar routines, he felt strangely restless, sensing that stillness could become a kind of trap rather than a place of safety. Even in rooms filled with people, he felt slightly misplaced, as if his imagination leaned toward distant horizons rather than shared conversations. Books became companions that asked nothing yet offered endless distance, allowing him to wander through frozen seas and unmapped spaces without leaving his chair. These imagined journeys were not escapes from fear, but careful rehearsals for uncertainty, shaped by a young mind learning how to endure loneliness without collapsing under it. While adults praised strength, he learned that endurance often came from restraint, patience, and the ability to wait without losing focus. Moments of subtle humor appeared in his thoughts, especially when he noticed how confidently people spoke about places they had never seen. This observation sharpened his skepticism, pushing him to trust experience over loud certainty. Family expectations pressed gently yet persistently, suggesting secure paths that promised approval but not fulfillment. Inside that pressure grew an awareness that comfort could dull attention and ease might slowly erase curiosity. Rather than rebel loudly, he absorbed discipline quietly, reshaping it into something useful instead of rejecting it outright. Cold landscapes fascinated him not for their danger, but for their honesty, since they revealed mistakes quickly and rewarded preparation generously. In social settings, he often remained on the edge, watching dynamics unfold, learning how leadership emerged through calm presence rather than raised voices. This observation planted early seeds of strategy, rooted in awareness instead of impulse. His sensitivity did not weaken him, but refined him, allowing discomfort to become instruction rather than distraction. While peers chased recognition, he cultivated readiness, practicing patience without announcing ambition. The absence of applause taught him independence, freeing him from relying on approval to measure progress. Small personal rituals formed, grounded in preparation and repetition, which quietly shaped resilience. Uncertainty no longer frightened him as much as false confidence, which he learned to distrust instinctively. Dreams of distant ice were not dramatic fantasies, but careful visions of places that demanded respect. He noticed how nature did not respond to bravery, only to understanding, and this lesson settled deeply. Amundsen's imagination matured slowly, shaped less by drama and more by endurance. He learned early that success rarely arrived loudly, often approaching quietly while attention remained steady. Social gatherings sometimes felt overwhelming, yet they taught him how presence could exist without performance. He carried humor inward, observing human pride with gentle distance rather than judgment. His inner world expanded as his outer world felt restrictive, creating a balance that sustained curiosity. Writing became another form of quiet conversation, allowing thoughts to clarify without interruption. Each reflection strengthened his preference for preparation over bravado. While others sought comfort in certainty, he practiced living with unanswered questions. This habit formed a mental flexibility that later proved invaluable. He understood that exploration began internally, long before maps or equipment appeared. Discipline grew not from authority, but from self-awareness. Moments of doubt remained frequent, yet they sharpened planning instead of halting progress. He recognized how fear could teach boundaries without commanding retreat. The world appeared less threatening once he accepted uncertainty as permanent. Even laughter, when it came, emerged softly through observation rather than spectacle. He respected silence, sensing its instructional quality. Preparation became his language of confidence. The desire to move beyond known spaces strengthened quietly. Ambition shaped itself into responsibility rather than dominance. Youthful sensitivity transformed into strategic calm, observation replaced impatience. He learned to trust slow accumulation of skill. Belonging felt less important than readiness. By the end of these early years, Amundsen stood not as a hero in waiting, but as a careful listener to his own inner compass, prepared to follow it outward when the time finally allowed. The quiet discipline he had practiced for years slowly met real movement, as ships, training routines, and long preparations transformed inner patience into outward motion without noise or theatrical declarations. Instead of chasing speed or fame, he leaned into method, testing routes repeatedly in his mind while accepting that progress was rarely straight and often demanded returning to mistakes without resentment. Cold no longer symbolized danger but clarity because it stripped away excuses, revealing who had prepared honestly and who relied too heavily on hope. Among crews and commanders, he noticed how confidence often spoke loudly while competence worked silently, a distinction that shaped his choices more than rank or tradition. He learned to lead through steadiness, knowing that calm decisions could travel farther than shouted commands when conditions turned unpredictable. Moments of humor surfaced during tense hours, not as jokes, but as gentle acknowledgments that humans often underestimated nature while overestimating themselves. Failure appeared not as humiliation, but as information, offering lessons that only those willing to pause long enough could read properly. The ice demanded respect rather than courage, and he responded by listening closely, adjusting plans with humility instead of insisting on pride. Each calculated step reflected an inner belief that survival favored preparation over daring, a belief tested repeatedly as conditions shifted without warning. While others framed exploration as conquest, he approached it as cooperation with forces much older and far less impressed by ambition. Even success felt strangely quiet, arriving without celebration, leaving him momentarily alone with responsibility rather than applause. He understood that leadership meant absorbing fear so others could function, a task performed internally and without display. Long nights encouraged reflection, reinforcing how solitude could sharpen awareness instead of diminishing resolve. The pace he chose frustrated those eager for spectacle, yet it built trust where noise could not. His sensitivity matured into strategic awareness, allowing him to read subtle changes before they escalated into danger. Rather than romanticize suffering, he treated discomfort as something to manage carefully, respecting its limits without glorifying endurance itself. Victory, when it appeared, felt almost secondary to the process that made it possible. He noticed how attention to small details consistently outweighed dramatic gestures. Maps became conversations between knowledge and uncertainty, not declarations of control. Confidence rested quietly in routine actions repeated correctly. Observers often mistook his calm for emotional distance, unaware that deep feeling motivated every cautious decision. The humor he carried softened tension without trivializing risk. He accepted that leadership could be lonely, especially when restraint disappointed those craving boldness. Risk remained constant, but recklessness was never invited. He valued silence during crises, allowing thought to organize itself before movement followed. The environment rewarded this approach by offering narrow margins that widened only through respect. Instead of chasing legacy, he focused on completion, trusting that outcomes would speak on their own terms. Preparation became a language shared with his team, replacing speeches with consistent example. Moments of doubt still surfaced, yet they no longer threatened direction. He recognized that exploration required emotional endurance as much as physical resilience. Trust formed slowly through consistency rather than charisma. The journey shaped him more than recognition ever could. Even achievement carried restraint, avoiding triumphal excess. He understood that nature remembered intention more than words. Every decision reflected years of quiet listening. The path forward remained uncertain, yet carefully chosen. Experience confirmed that attention saved lives. Leadership settled into responsibility rather than authority. The ice acknowledged patience, movement followed thought. Calm replaced urgency, focus displaced fear. Respect guided progress. He carried forward without spectacle. Silence remained a companion, the journey continued inward as much as outward. By the time the horizon widened fully before him, Amundsen stood not as a conqueror of extremes, but as someone shaped by restraint, awareness, and patience, prepared to move onward with humility rather than noise.